Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Big Three, the podcast where we unpack the biggest stories, insights, and shifts shaping influencer marketing and the creator economy. I'm your host, Sefi Cabroni. Joining me today is Monica Khan, founder of Creator Revolution. Monica has spent time at YouTube, Meta, and Spotter, always on the side of building infrastructure and programs for creators. So she's seen the space from every angle: platform operator and founder. We wanted to sit down with Monica because few people in this industry have sat on as many sides of the table as she has. And that perspective is exactly what you need when you're trying to understand how creative partnerships actually scale and what breaks when they do. So today we'll discuss what brands get wrong, where programs fracture under pressure, and how teams should be thinking about creative partnerships in 2026. Monica, welcome to the Big Three. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction and for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Absolutely. And it's a very relevant conversation, right?
Yes, it's very top of mind. And I really do think we are at an inflection point when it comes to, brands partnering with creators, companies building for creators and the infrastructure that's needed. It's very exciting times. And I really do feel like we're at a special inflection point right now.
Monica, before we dive into the main topic of today's conversation, I just introduced you. I'm curious about how you introduce yourself these days.
Well, it's a lot, right? I've done a lot in the creator economy. I've had a long career. I'm very grateful for all of the stops that I've made. I typically now say that, I work at the intersection of creators, brands, and platforms and have experience sitting on all of those sides of the table. And one of the roles that I'm excited about this year is being a senior advisor to McKinsey on how to think about creators, not just as a marketing channel, but as infrastructure across their business. So my background, as you know, as you've said, has spanned across the platforms like, YouTube, Google, and Meta, as well as, companies like Spotter. So I've seen from platform, product, and operator perspectives. And, right now spending my time really trying to elevate partnerships into being more strategic and long-term between brands and creators. And I'm also doing that as a creator manager as well. So, having a lot of fun doing it right now.
Monica, again, I mentioned this in the introduction, but obviously you have a very unique POV and unique perspective about all angles of the industry. What does that full picture give you that most people in this space don't?
Say that again?
What does that full picture give you that most people in the space don't have? Like, what are you seeing across the industry?
Yeah, I think I'm able to really see big picture, what the brands are talking about in the boardrooms and how they're actually putting in place the systems needed to partner with creators. I'm really starting to see that transition, especially with my conversations with brands as part of supporting McKinsey and how, they've started to partner with creators, but they are wanting to do more. So what does more look like? What does going from campaigns to infrastructure mean? So I'm seeing that high level view, but then as a manager of creator talent, like Marina Milko, Silicon Valley girl, I'm literally on the day to day, negotiating with brands on various partnerships that for her and other clients. But then also, like, once we've got those, partnerships in place, like creatively collaborating around those campaigns and the execution and what that should look like. So I can get really in the weeds of the execution, and I know who the players are at the execution level, but I also have that access to the executives at these companies and, sort of seeing how they're thinking about the opportunities and trade-offs as well.
Monica, from those conversations that you're having every day, both with creators and brands, what are they bringing to you?
I think that, creators are coming to me asking about the kinds of deals I may be structuring for Marina and other clients that I represent. So, is there something that they're missing when it comes to how they structure those partnerships, how they position themselves, and, are they leaving any opportunity or value on the table? I think that creators also struggle with, should I price that or should I not? Like, what is the right balance of value, especially when you're building a partnership with a brand that you deeply respect and admire, and you want to impress and deliver on that value, but you also want to be compensated for your work and your effort. So what is that fine balance when pricing is not so black and white and concrete? So it really is not just up to the brand to make those decisions, but also the creator to think about how they're positioning themselves and what they're okay with. In some cases, creators are like, no worries. Like, I don't want to charge for that because like, I really believe in what this content could be and what the long-term play here is. So that's happening on the creator side. I think on the brand side, the question is often around what are those real world outcomes that brands who have been successful with creators are seeing, and what does that look like? And then also, what does measurement look like around that? Because when we talk about those real world outcomes, right, this goes beyond what vanity metrics tell us and like what the content performance looks like. And obviously, I think that the performance marketers are so excited about the vanity metrics because the data is right there. It tells you how something performed. You can compare it to another piece of content. So it's very clear, right? But that never tells the full story of what the outcomes are that creators really drove, right? Because when you do that, it skews towards sort of the awareness conversation, which is great, but that's only part of the story, right? They're absolutely driving higher intention and the consideration piece. Like when you look at a creator who's posted multiple pieces of content for that same brand, you'll see the quality of those comments evolve over time, where you see people leaning in more and becoming familiar with that brand, specifically with that creator that they're following, right? And then they see also conversion. You give them enough tough touch points between the creator and that following, and that you'll see them actually like drive conversion, whether it's through a UTM link or they're accessing the brand in other ways, right? Because it's not always straightforward that they click on the link, that it's in their mind and they get to it at some point, right? So when they're doing these campaigns with multiple creators and they have these sort of heavy traffic points of like working with a lot of creators, they should be looking at also their overall traffic and all of their touch points of do they see a lift in general? And of course, there's a more longer term kind of brand lift type studies and sentiment surveys and things like that. Yeah. But, I think that the reality is that the measurement, the attribution is not perfect, and that if you do it this way, you'll get a fuller story, and you want to be able to present the fuller picture because as you and I know, creators are moving at the speed of culture, and that's where the conversations are happening, and that's where the decisions are being made. It's just really, it's not as clear as how to measure, but that there are ways to do it.
Absolutely. Well, let's start zooming in some of the things that happen when brands start thinking about not just creator campaigns, but creator programs and how that scales and what happens when the creator program starts to scale. First of all, tell us what's the difference between running influencer campaigns and building a creator program inside of a campaign.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of different things. I think when you're thinking about it like a campaign, it feels very one-off. There is no potential future promise of working with those creators again. There's also not necessarily a plan for how you'll do this again with creators, right? So I think when we talk about a creator program, it is this always on mindset that enters the picture, where a brand is thinking about how they're working with creators on various campaigns all the time so that it's constantly happening, right? Versus maybe they have a big launch coming up and everything revolves around the launch. I think like this also speaks to beyond their creator program, their own storytelling and content strategy that they should be leaning into, where how are you showing up as a brand in an always on capacity? And how are you inviting creators into being advocates for that always on storytelling, these creators who are also doing their own always on storytelling with their respective communities. And you're effectively taking a page out of their playbook, but also, asking for permission to join their respective party, right? Because that's what you're doing when you do a partnership. Like, they've got their followings and are saying, hey, like you can come in here and let's work on something to showcase why this is something I'm excited about, right? And then they tap into that value and that trust that those creators have formed with them. So then once you start thinking about it in always on capacity, you also start to think about building that kind of experimentation muscle, right? The testing and learning that creators have just like truly embraced and absorbed and have become inherent to how do you find and build an audience, right? So that's the same with creators. Like, how are you finding those creator advocates that you want to work with again? Because that is the goal, right? Because like I've said before, in other conversations, not here, I'm like now repeating myself. I can't even remember when I say it, but it's like, when we think about long-term partnerships, it's that familiarity again, that a creator is building with an audience. When they talk about something multiple times over, they're reducing friction when it comes to acquiring customers for a brand. So that always on piece, like that's why I have a hard time now when I see brands asking clients I represent for just sort of one video. And I always try to expand that conversation, not just so the creator can get more money just for the sake of getting paid for money. I want this to be a, productive partnership on both sides where the creator has a chance to create multiple pieces, maybe on the same platform or across multiple platforms, where the brand then gets more signals on how this creator is performing. And then they can combine those signals with the signals they're getting from other creator partnerships, right? Because now they're creating this like learning machine that they go back into testing with, right? So, because ideally you want to be working with some creators on a repeat basis. And now we're starting to think about like, what does a creator program look like, to your question, where you've got creators that you're constantly sort of scouring to test and learn with that correlate to who you identify as your ideal customer personas. But then as you're testing and learning with these creators, there are going to be some that you do these repeat partnerships with. And then once you start doing the repeat partnerships with, you can also leverage that to your advantage from a marketing standpoint of like, this is our creator program. These are our ambassadors, if you will, who represent faces of our brand as well. So then you're kind of co-creating with them as well, right? And then once you get into that level, right, there's always the potential for actually creating things together, whether it be products that you're building or more full-fledged content together that maybe lives on the brand side. And like we're seeing now brands operating like studios where they're willing to now underwrite these new series, right, new original content from creators, which I do see as the direction. I mean, I think baby steps in that way, but we're definitely moving that way. I think that's where I like to think about kind of a creator program as kind of a pyramid where we see the sort of those top creators that have those longer term partnerships and are kind of like in residency with brands sort of at the top. Then you've got the bulk that are in sort of that paid partnership bucket. But then you've got this bottom bucket where it's like maybe you're doing gifting and seeding things, but also there's like the potential for doing like an affiliate program, right? Where maybe you're not reaching out to creators to work with them on an intentionally paid capacity, but you're giving them the tools to promote it and also drive affiliate revenue. If you want to build a kind of like self-service engine for creators, can also be amazing to like create like a whole ecosystem of creators talking about you. So you can go up and down in any what direction. There are so many ways to be doing this. And we're starting to see so many case studies now of how to do that. But anyway, it starts with really testing and learning and being willing to look at like the always on mentality.
Well, actually, that was one of my questions to you. What's the first like mindset shift that you try to sort of instill to that companies that try to create the creator programs? Is that the always on mentality?
Yes, the always on mentality. I think it's also like, being chronically online and social listening of, who are the creators that you should be working with, respect to your business goals and your growth goals and who you're trying to reach from an ideal customer persona, and then having that inform, who are the creators that you want to partner with. So that social listening and R&D is really important. But then, this is also part of that building that muscle around, A/B testing and learning from the content that you're producing on your own, on your own platforms, but then in partnership with creators as well. And these are all signals that you should be, sort of measuring on an ongoing basis to inform how you move forward in each of these respects at a very sort of lower level of how do I partner with this creator to what are the new campaigns I should be creating? Because in all of these partnerships, you're learning constantly and ideating as well. Like they can inform your new campaigns and new messaging that you can think like, because even with the creators themselves, like what kind of messaging are you testing with one creator on one platform? That's where it's like it gets crazy, right? Because it's like now you should also be having a portfolio approach to all of this, right? There's, you think about the creators and the different sizes that they represent in terms of following. There's the mega influencer, and then there's the micro influencer. There's the kind of niche that each creator represents, right? And then there's obviously the metrics that go along with it. But then you look at how they're performing on YouTube and the quality of their community there. But then you also look at how they're doing on TikTok versus Instagram and other places like Substack or wherever you're trying to reach. But like having a really good understanding of how you think about those platforms as part of your creator partnership and marketing strategy, and how you're testing and learning with each of these creators, right? So then when you're partnering with creators, you're just skewing one which way. You're actually testing different cohorts of creators around specific messaging, for example, right? Because not everyone's going to necessarily be doing like an awareness kind of oriented piece. Like some of them may get into the weeds of what the workflow is that product represents. And certain creators will be better positioned to get into the specifics of that versus other creators, right? And sometimes when you think about, what the creators that you work with, they're the creators that line up exactly with who those ideal customer profiles are. But then there's also the creators that just have a lot of those ideal customer profiles in their community. They're not necessarily one for one of like, that's the most obvious creator I would think about, but they have enough of a breadth of a community that would find it interesting to see that brand paired with that creator, right? So anyway, I could keep talking about this, but I think like really it's about the always on, it's about portfolio strategy, and it's about measurement and the data signals and thinking about an ongoing learning agenda. This is not an overnight strategy that will win overnight. Like it's not, there's no silver bullet here. This is part of building a sort of multi-tiered, multi-dimensional strategy that you kick off as part of like an operating system you build, for your company. And, I think that also, I think that when we talk about creator partnerships, it often is living within influencer and creator marketing. But I think that because I'm talking about full funnel impact that creators can have through these partnerships, there are other teams that would be vested in wanting to talk with creators and partner with them. So paid often sits with growth. It doesn't sit with social and influencer, right?
Yeah.
But those teams should be talking to each other. Paid should be put behind certain creators because of how their content is performing. That should be a strategic lever that the teams think about. Also, product would probably be very interested in knowing, how the feedback that creators have, but then also what are the comments saying? What are the comments actually saying? And not to just ideate about how should they be promoting, their product with creators in the future, but like, how should they be changing the product itself, right? There's valuable product feedback that's gold sitting there in the comments. And then I would even say like the sales teams, right? Like the sales teams are probably like, whoa, creators are like this insane growth engine. Like, how should we be thinking about our goals? And like the CRO thinking about like, that's driving revenue. I care about that then, right? Yeah. So I think that it sits with an influencer, and I love the influencer teams and these heads of influencer, but like, I think that creator should be a cross-functional thread. And that's when I say creator infrastructure, this is the new operating system. This is what I mean. So many different teams leading in. And like, how do you think of that as like a, sort of like a powerful growth engine that's cross-functional?
Monica, when all that is in place, I mean, everything that you just mentioned, that always on mentality, that when teams start to grow and the partnerships start to scale and become more like a creative program, what's usually the thing that breaks first?
It's a very good question. I think what often breaks, and it's like actually has nothing to do with the creators per se, but it's sometimes it's the actual headcount in place, right? We've got the team who's super bought into creator, and then maybe some of the key stakeholders move on, right? And I think that continuity is hard for a playbook and space that is very new. So I see that a lot where I'm being brought in to advise these teams, and I'm like, well, you guys have done this before. oh no, they haven't done it. Previous folks at the company have done it. So there's a little bit of like constant re-education. So there is it's like a gap when it comes to continuity at these companies around creator marketing, and how do they future proof the risk of that, of, when teams are changing and people are changing and the priorities shift, like how do they preserve that as people change? I think that's part of it. I think, I think brands, when they're partnering with creators, maybe they're doing it through their in-house team. Maybe they're doing it with that as well as with agencies. They're not always thinking about what creator first means. I feel that I painted the picture of what an amazing creator program could be and could look like. But I think that when we say creator first and co-create and truly partner with creators, like I think that companies are not set up to do that well because of, for example, existing approval processes that they have in place when it comes to, putting information out there publicly. They're just inherent creative approval processes, which can sometimes bog down the process and also hurt the creative because of all the back and forth that can happen. And then all of a sudden, the few talking points turn into like completely revamping, script, like it becomes a full on script, right? And I think that this is where, companies have good intention, but they've not set up internally to to instill the creative freedom required with the right sort of folks who are in the driver's seat executing to just run and go, but then also give the creator partners the freedom to sell this, like to tell the story to the best of their ability, right? And I think that that's where that's a hard part of it.
A quick follow-up question. You mentioned before that continuous loop of education within a company, something around those lines, continuous education about what a true creative partner program looks like. Do you feel that will change eventually?
I think that will change. And I also think that the infrastructure around creator economy, like even take, net influencer, like we're just seeing more robust ways of companies like recognizing that this is a really important space to pay attention to. There are ways to stay in touch and stay on top of what the latest is and what they should be doing. I feel that, this is like a space that's like just only recently evolving and sort of deepening and all the sort of tentacles, if you will. So, I think that it'll become just like natural as headcount shifts, as people evolve, that's just part of the playbook. Like they don't think about modern marketing without thinking about creator. I feel like we're now in the days of like just kind of codifying that right now, but it will be codified soon enough. That'll just be, of course, we have to think about what the creator strategy looks like.
100%. Monica, let me ask you this. What happens to a company that keeps treating creative partnerships as short-term tactical campaigns? What are they risking long term?
I mean, I think that they're actually risking like really, hurting their brand equity, if you will, the perception that people who follow those creators may have, negative perception. So I don't know, like it depends on the extent of those partnerships that go bad, if you will, because creators have these platforms where they can put brands on blast if they want. Like that's a real risk. I mean, I think that the risk of being canceled is really real. And when you're working with creators, like it's a very public facing thing. So you need to bring a lot of sensitivity to that. And, if you're wanting to work with creators and as part of your long game, if you will, you don't want to, mess that up in ways that could have, ripple effects with other creators who they're friends with, right? So I think that's part of like, if you want to build long term with creators and as a function, you want to do it right. And it's a very public facing thing that could have like pretty negative effects on your brand equity, and you don't want that.
Okay. Let's make it practical, Monica. When you look at the market today, what do brands still consistently get wrong about creative partnerships? And on the flip side, what do the best ones understand that others don't?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the ones who typically get it wrong are treating creators like an extension of their ad strategy versus treating them as creative partners, right? And I think that the extension of the ad strategy, then you bucket into, oh, they're like celebrity partnerships, right? And they are not celebrities, right? Because these are creators that may have the clout of celebrities and like, be seen as celebrities to folks, but they've built that trust with their followers over time. They've consistently showed up and they are going to be creating content, whether that brand partners with them or not. They're not going anywhere, right? So I think that the brands that recognize that this is a much bigger opportunity to partner with a creator versus like treat it as transactional is going to fully maximize the value out of creator partnerships. I think a couple other things in the brands I would have kind of alluded to is the over scripting, the over approving, and kind of really stripping away the very thing that make creators effective. And that's the authenticity and audience trust that they bring to the table, the lived experience. So I think that when brands recognize that creators are not just, creating content, they're translating that message for their audience in a way that the audience will care about. That's a really massive, like, aha moment for brands. And I think that, brands also expecting, like really obsessing over immediate conversions. And, when they do a partnership with a creator and the creator doesn't hit those numbers that they were looking for. And it's like, well, if it's on YouTube, that these are evergreen. You're going to see those views in time. And that's how YouTube, and there's so many little nuances to that where it's like, it's very short-sighted, right? Yeah. So I think that brands are doing that are just kind of missing out again on the fuller opportunity. So all of the brands that are doing it right have gone past this, right? That they're seeing the opportunity in this kind of always on way. They're building towards building a more robust creator program. And they're using the data that they're getting from the partnerships along the way to inform how they grow this, right? And they don't think about, they'll look at how much they spent on a creator and how did they perform, but it's not just the vanity metrics. It's the fuller tale of that full funnel impact. And they're getting creative on how to show how those creators move the needle. And it could just be screenshots of specific people commenting on their thing. And sometimes those comments, it's not just the quality of the comments, it's who commented, right? It's the composition of those followers. And it's like, if just 3 certain executives or something commented in certain situations, it's like, honestly, that's all the brand needed to know. So like, it just depends on what the goals are. And I think that's where brands are recognizing, like, there is not a one way to like, just, box measurement into this is how a creator is successful. And that's why I also get like a little, turned off as a creator manager when I'm like haggling with, brands about the pricing and like, oh, can't do that price because like she's averaging this. And I'm like, oh, here we go. This is probably not going to be a good fit. Right. And also like in the situation where these brands have access to paid media. And I'm like, if you're so concerned about the reach that this piece of video is going to get, like, is this creative aligned with your brand and what you want to put out there? Then put paid behind it. Like, what's the issue?
Yeah. Monica, I'm curious about what you just said from the creator angle, from the creator side of the table. What are you hearing consistently that maybe brands would probably be surprised with?
I think that what I'm hearing from creators is that, they want support from brands. They want brands to, pardon my language, give a shit about them beyond just partnering with them. So that they see them as humans and as, real professionals in the careers that they lead. And in some cases, these folks are doing this as a side quest, right? Like they still have their full-time job elsewhere and they're, doing it on top of. So I think that creators need a lot of support. And I obviously know this having worked, in my roles as partner manager and leading a team of creator success folks and really understanding the solo journey that creators are facing and like how they, need more resources and information. Like you're asking me like what they ask about, like how could brands also think about when they build these creator programs of like, what is it that creators need to like want to keep working with me, whether it's an affiliate capacity or like some sort of campaign or in a longer term way, like because the reality is that we're going to see more and more brands reaching out to creators, and they're going to have to be making choices on who they partner with. And, it's starting to get pretty crowded. And then if you like break down categories, like, do creators want to work with multiple brands in the same category? Not all the time, right? And also creators are feeling the itch to want to launch their own products, right? So, and compete with some of those brands, right? So I think that the sooner brands can realize that, yes, they want to get paid, but they would appreciate all sorts of value add from, maybe you organize an event, bringing creators together, a way to market what you're doing, but also just bring them together, and contentment and satisfaction, and just like meeting each other and learning from each other. And that's exciting, right? I think they also are always open to moments of exposure and visibility. So when you're bringing an event together and that company maybe puts that on Instagram and promotes it and all of the things, and that's exciting. Like, they want visibility as well, right? So I think that there are a lot of ways for brands to provide an additional layer of support beyond just paying them, that strengthens the relationship, where you have an edge over other brands. And that is, right now, I think we're still seeing brands come up, but it's getting competitive. It's getting saturated, right?
Monica, if we think about, after the conversation we had so far, if we bring this to a leadership level, what advice would you give to a CMO, or what would you change immediately how your company approaches creative partnerships if you were sitting at a CMO seat?
Yeah, if I were sitting in a CMO seat, I'd want to make sure, first and foremost, before we even bring up creator, do you have a strong awareness of what you want your brand to be from a value standpoint, who you're trying to reach from a customer segment standpoint that aligns with how the business is performing? And I want to see that connection between marketing strategy and goals to business goals, right? And I think that CMOs and marketers historically have not always been on the hook for business goals. And I think that modern marketing is telling us that needs to be more in sync. So maybe that means the COO, CRO, other functions are vested in that relationship between marketing as a growth engine to drive, those target business outcomes.
Yeah.
And creator is a performance, engine within that.
Yeah. Monica, I'm thinking about the future. If we look ahead a couple of years from now, what do you think will separate the brands that really thrive in the next phase of the creator economy than from the ones that get less?
Well, certainly, we spent a lot of time talking about what a creator program can look like, what a good creator program could look like. I think that a brand that has scaled that and really institutionalized that, I think will win. As people continue to watch so many different people online, consume content across so many different places, and trust continues to get fragmented across so many places. So brands building the system and infrastructure now to build the system in which to tap into all of these communities that are going to continue to fragment and grow in all of these different places is only going to help them be better positioned to tap into the next thing, which, as we know, culture is moving at the speed of light. So once you have the system, then you're better positioned to tap into it in the always on mentality that we've described is necessary to be successful. And I think, and I alluded to this earlier as well, is that I think that the brands that realized that their own storytelling, that they should be creators themselves, as taking a playbook out of how creators operate, they will also be the ones that are well positioned, right? Because I think in so many different respects, at an individual level, at a company startup level, everyone needs to be thinking about brand and storytelling and what that means and looks like. And creators is just a part of that, and it's a part of the overall media storytelling strategy. So then a company's own strategy needs to be prioritized in that as well. So what does that mean and look like? All of a sudden, I think we're going to see, like I was saying, like companies building their own studios maybe as part of that storytelling because of how well that may be doing, and bringing creators along the way to be thought partners and co-creators in that. So I'm very excited about how the landscape of, storytelling will evolve with these dynamics.
Monica, this was such a great conversation. Final thought you'd like to leave our audience with?
I mean, I think what I'll say is that, I kind of just said it, but that like storytelling is really the area that people and organizations need to be focusing on. I think creators are doing the best at this right now, and the numbers don't lie. The communities that they've built, the brands that they've built, and now their ability to launch other businesses on the backs of that is the proof. The proof points are right there. The track record is right there. And I think there are so many people and companies that can learn from that. And, I feel like that's kind of my mission here, where I want to advocate for creators' rightful place in media as the next generation of media companies. And I'm really excited to see how the dynamics of this world and ecosystem continue to evolve with creators at the helm.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Monica. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us and sharing your perspective. And to everyone listening, thanks as always for tuning in into the Big Three. We'll be back soon with more conversations and insights from the creator economy. Bye, Monica.
Bye, Sissy. Thank you so much.
See ya.